Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this awesome, beautiful, sunny day. We appreciate you being with us, and a special thanks to our panelists today who are also taking time out of this beautiful day to talk with us about best practices on mask wearing as we're all entering new phases of the Safe Start plan and figuring out how to do business in this new world. My name is Sarah Childs. I work with the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce and also am the Executive Director for Business Health Trust. Special thanks to both Business Health Trust and the Chamber for putting these webinars on, working with the panelists and really developing the content that we can be able to share with you. A few webinar logistics before we get started. If you need technical help, please use the chat box. This chat box really, if you can't hear something or you're having issues, our team can help you troubleshoot, but please don't put questions in here, as the Q&A panel is best for questions. This will help us be able to track and make sure that we get to all of the questions, or as many questions as we can during this time. We also will record this webinar and post it to the event page at the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce later today. So take a minute, make sure that you see the email that will come through later today. There will be a link as well as other resources that might come up during the event today. So before I invite our panelists to join me, I wanted to talk a little bit about masks. Since we are talking about masks today, I wanted to give all of the folks listening today the opportunity to be able to get low or no cost masks. So in the chat panel right now, Lee will be putting two links. One is if you are outside of King County, Business Health Trust and the Chamber have subsidized masks for businesses. You can get masks for your company, the quantity that you need for $1 a mask. These are reusable, washable cloth masks and fit nearly every face. So you can go to that website and order and get them shipped to your door. If you are in King County, we are handing out free Safe Start kits. These include disposable masks, cloth masks, and hand sanitizer, courtesy of King County. And you can visit safestartkingcounty.com and sign up for a pickup location. On Friday in Soto, the industrial district, we will be having contactless pickups. And you can also visit that website and order a kit to be sent to you, and you just pay the shipping. So those are two great resources as we're talking about masks for you and your company to get masks that you might need as we continue to operate in this new world. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists and invite them to turn on their video and audio. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I wanted to just start by asking each of you to introduce yourself and what company you're with. So Patrick, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Okay, good morning. My name is Pat Kellens, and I'm the Executive Vice President over Administration at Costco. And some of my responsibilities include oversight over HR and risk management and marketing and membership. Great.
And John, welcome.
Thank you. I'm John Minetti. I'm the Director of Safety and Operations Solutions at PSE. And I've been in that position for a couple of months since the beginning of the pandemic, really. But I've been with the company for about 11 years and happy to be here.
Great, thank you. And Kimberly.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Meck, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance of People with Disabilities that serves King County.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today. So I wanted to, we're talking about best practices here, and I'm sure our participants are going to have lots of questions as it relates specifically to their organizations and understand what other organizations are doing as well. So that's kind of my hope for this panel, as we can really learn from each other and the different situations that each company has encountered and best practices. So, Pat, I would love for you to start by, talking a little bit about how Costco set up their mandatory mask policy. You guys were one of the first to do that back in May. Talk to us about how you went about setting that up, and has it changed since then?
Sure. So I think we were influenced by our experience in Asia, in our Costco warehouses in Asia. And so we were very early on, we decided that it would be a good thing for all our employees in the US to be wearing masks. So we actually mandated masks or required masks for our employees in mid-April when we knew we could get a steady supply of single-use masks. So we've been at this for quite some time. And then for our customers, we call them members, we required masks starting the first week of May 4th, I think it was. And honestly, we would have done it earlier had there really been a steady supply and ready availability of masks. Our policy, both for employees and for our customers, has been the same, practically the same from the very beginning. We did actually make some modifications for employees since we started, and that was mostly having to do with the fact like some of our employees work outside. They're on, cart duty. They're in the parking lot picking up carts, or they're in the gas stations. And sometimes in warm weather climates, we decided that it was better to relent on that and let them not wear a mask if they're outside and not near any of our customers. But other than that small exception, our requirement has been the same for both employees and members from the very beginning.
So are there talk to me about the considerations for implementing face covering requirement in your stores where the government wasn't or isn't requiring it?
Yeah, I think this was more important even back when we first started because there were a couple of jurisdictions in April that were requiring employees to wear masks, but for the most part, it was all very, it was a suggestion, it was it was a consideration, but we decided that if we're going to do this, in the interest of it was all in the interest of keeping our employees safe in the first instance. And we decided, and it's the way that we do a lot of different things, is like if we're going to do this, we need to have some uniform rules around it. And it can't be jurisdiction by jurisdiction. We're very used, at Costco, we're very used to implementing rules that are consistent throughout the country and sometimes throughout the world. So for us, it was going to be all or nothing. And as you can imagine, there were some questions about that when we first started it, even from employees, when it wasn't a state requirement or a city requirement. But I think for our employees, most of them understand that like this is the way Costco does things. It's across the board. It was more difficult, honestly, when we instituted the rule for our member customers, particularly in those jurisdictions where it was not a requirement, it was only a suggestion. But honestly, I think that we get the benefit, or we had the benefit of being a membership club. So our members are used to us making up rules, or they know that they need to live by our rules in order to have what we call the privilege of shopping at Costco. They pay a membership fee, and they abide by these, sometimes unique rules that we have. So I do think that we got some mileage out of the fact like we feel like this is something that we want to do, and if you don't have to shop at Costco, but if you want to, this is the rule you're going to have to abide by. And I will say too, maybe the final point on that, we did get the whole purpose of us instituting this rule with respect to our members was because we knew that for our employees, it didn't make a whole lot of sense for us to institute this rule, this requirement for our employees, but then allow members to just sort of, choose, pick and choose what they wanted to do. In the interest of protecting our employees, we knew that we had to do this for members as well. And I think that, in this great big community of Costco members and employees, it was actually a pretty decent message that everybody could understand. Like we're doing this in order to protect our community, including our employees. And so not to say that this was not without its hitches, but I do feel like we were able to do this in a way, again, assisted by the fact that we are this community of members and employees.
So you guys have a unique, model as a membership shopping organization. And, I can definitely see where that was helpful in communicating that message. John, at PSE, you guys have a little different situation. You have people both in the field and in the office and kind of not a members-based organization. Could you talk to us a little bit about what PSE is doing? Kind of what is your mask policies and what is it in the various aspects of the company?
Sure. Yeah, we're requiring face coverings for any employee in a PSE facility or working outside in public, and it's with very limited exceptions based on mainly labor and industries exceptions. So if a employee is in an office with four walls and a door and are alone, we say, okay, you can take it off. But we're trying to just really get consistency without too much nuance. So for the most part, it's a mandatory face covering policy while on a facility or on a job site.
So how do you ensure the safety of your staff and customers when they are interacting in the field?
So it really starts with just understanding the requirements from a safety standpoint. And so from the very beginning, we've had people working in the field, doing emergency work, keeping the lights on. We've had gas workers going inside people's houses to do leak investigation. And so the first thing we did was really we scaled down any work that wasn't absolutely essential. And since then, we've been gradually bringing it back. But that scaling down enabled us to focus on what's really important, making sure we can do the work, maintaining social distance, making sure we can get good hand hygiene out to the field, and then making sure we can get face coverings out there as well. And so once we identify the requirements, then it kind of falls to then the process. So we're working with different business leaders for all these different situations of work that we do in the field to make sure that it can be done safely and to come up with creative ways of doing the work, maybe doing the procedures differently, integrating COVID-related hazard assessments into a checklist before beginning work in order to make sure that the work can be done safely. And we've done some interesting things. We've done, we've given gas workers and other workers that interface with customers scripts about how to tell customers the importance of social distancing, that they're going to have masks on so that people aren't, getting concerned or anything like that, especially at the beginning. We've given certain groups of people sandwich boards that they can set up kind of around where they're working in order to get the message out to people that might come up to them saying, keep your distance. And it's amazing how often customers will come up to a utility worker and just ask what's going on. But we want to be able to keep people safe.
Yeah, the script, that's a really interesting idea. I think that might be one that I steal and tell other folks about as a great best practice and tool as we're all starting to go through this together. I think one of the questions I have just as a fellow citizen, right, is what to do when people are not wearing masks. We are in a situation right now where it is, required in businesses. Businesses are supposed to be not policing that, but helping people understand the importance. But there are some folks that cannot wear masks. So, I'd, love to hear from you, Kimberly. How do we, as employers, navigate that? When someone is not wearing a mask, how do you know if they can't wear a mask? Talk to us a little bit from your perspective.
It's actually a really difficult, touchy situation in some cases. So there's a lot of guidance out there right now that you should ask a person if they have a medical condition or disability, but I just encourage businesses to ask if the individual has an exemption to wearing a face covering, because then it doesn't require a person to actually disclose their disability. It's also important for businesses to note that they can prohibit a person without a face covering from entering their business. They can cite a direct threat to their employees or other customers for people who are not wearing face coverings. That being said, there are typically different reactions that you'll get when somebody isn't wearing a face covering, and some of them can be hostile and grumpy. But for people who are who have a medical excuse for not wearing a face covering, they will understand what a accommodation is, and so they'll understand those words. And so I highly encourage businesses to figure out what they are able to offer to a customer. It all obviously depends upon what type of business it is. So if it's a restaurant, are there separate seating areas that individual could go to? Delivery, takeout. If it's a grocery store, is there curbside pickup? Can you do online ordering? So it all depends on what the capacity of the business actually is, as well as the type of business.
Yeah, there two things that you said really stood out to me. One is just using the language, do you have an exemption from wearing a mask? Maybe simple, but not, that's not part of my normal vocabulary. That's a really helpful phrase. And then the accommodations, what as businesses, and starting to think proactively, what as, a retail business or a grocery store, et cetera, what can we do for people who do have exemptions or cannot be wearing face coverings? Those are really helpful things, I think, for employers to start to think through. So a little personal anecdote. So I went to the grocery store last week, and my kiddos are little. So my 5-year-old, he's wearing his mask. He's been wearing it for a long time. 5-year-olds can do it. And he went to the grocery store and just did not understand why some people were not wearing masks. And he just, in his sweet little way, like walked up to someone and tapped them on the shoulder and said, "Would you like a mask?" And the gentleman completely ignored him, was so rude to my sweet little son. It was like, good job speaking up, buddy. But, let's talk about what do we do as employees or as management when we do have situations that, someone does come into the store, asking about exemption, yes, but how do you handle, maybe Pat, how do you handle people that are, not wanting to comply? Regardless of kind of who might sweetly or not sweetly confront them on things.
Yeah, no, these are good questions. In the early days of this, in the early part of May, as we were instituting this rule for our member customers, one of the things that we thought, maybe naively, was that if we can just get the word out, if we can just let people know far enough in advance, they will understand if they come to Costco that they have to wear a mask. And we just, like, the interest was in getting the word out. Little did we know that once this Costco requirement hit social media, it was we got the note, we got the word out, and then some. And much of it early on was very negative. We saw quite a bit of backlash on social media, and it was largely negative. Personal liberties and that sort of thing. But it really did help to get the word out. It did help to get the notice out, and it helped us to be consistent with our enforcement of the rule. And pretty quickly, that negative feeling about it started to turn positive. It started to turn neutral or mixed, and then largely positive. And again, I attribute that partly to the fact, because we were early to this, to the fact that we are this membership club. And so it's not to say that we didn't encounter some members who wanted to express themselves either on social media or at the door of the warehouse. But there was something about, just appealing to, the good nature of people to say, like, we don't know whether this is, we think that this is something simple we can do that is going to protect everybody. And we made sure that we would isolate those angry encounters and make sure that it wasn't just a rank and file employee that was dealing with these angry members. It was a manager, and it was somebody who was going to deal with this sort of outside, without an audience, put it that way. Mm-hmm. And we sort of dealt with the exceptions. And I have to admit, like, today, it is so much easier than it was a month ago, because there's so much more understanding and so much more acceptance, at least in most parts of the country, that this is something that's going to be beneficial at the very least.
So you talk about it's a little easier now because you've been doing it a while. What advice would you have to business managers as they're just starting to implement and require masks and really walk that
Well, for us, we had to think about all of, we're operating nationwide, so we needed to make sure that we were, both consistent across the board and complying with, the various laws and regulations. But one of the things, of course, you have to do is you have to have, masks available to people in the event that they don't have something that they can use. And the other part of it is, again, I don't want to be naive about this, but I really do think that there's something about appealing to people's, better natures to say, look, we know that, to have some humility about it. We know that this is uncomfortable. We know that this is something that, nobody likes to wear a mask all the time, but it's the one thing that we can do, not just to protect, ourselves, but to protect these Costco employees is the way that we would put it, as they're operating in this essential business. And again, I really think that that's for us, that there really is something about that humility, that community that takes hold. And I guess I would encourage everybody to kind of see it that way. It's this little thing that nobody likes, but we can all do it.
Yeah, it definitely has a part. How much is to still be seen, but it has a part in reducing that community transmission. Sure. Everything we can do. I say best case, we stomp out COVID, right? Mm-hmm. Worst case, we get a funny tan line this summer. Like, meh. So I want to shift gears a little bit to employees. So, how have you, John, implemented the requirement for employees, and how have you all navigated when an employee, has an exemption? And then, we'll turn to Kimberly, and I'm interested in some, what are some accommodations that you might recommend, or how to be navigating that from the employer-employee standpoint?
So we implemented it fairly early on, as soon as we could get enough face coverings to supply it to people. And I think it's really been about communicating it as often as we can in as many different ways as we can. We send emails to leadership, we send emails to the company, and if you do this all day, every day, you sort of think, hey, we told you. But at the end of the day, you need to reach people in lots of different ways, and you can't assume that everyone gets it. And especially with the face coverings, it can be pretty confusing to figure out at times. And so we've had to, over the course of many months, try to clarify and simplify our face coverings policies. We have our officer team out there talking about face coverings. We're producing videos about face coverings for employees to watch. And so it really is just kind of ongoing, get the word out, trying to appeal in different ways, not just from a compliance with the rules standpoint, but also protect your fellow employees, protect your family members. That's why we practice safety. And as far as people not doing it, I think at PSE, we're very used to wearing PPE for all kinds of different activities, hard hats, safety glasses, steel-toed boots, vests, gloves. It just kind of comes with the territory of running a utility. And so we view the face covering as just another piece of PPE that we say, okay, well, we have an expectation that you wear it, unless, of course, you have an accommodation. And if you have an accommodation, then we'll look for either an alternative face covering, and their face coverings made out of different materials that might work better from a breathability standpoint, or potentially a different job task or another way of mitigating the hazard.
So Kimberly, talk to us about some tips for employers and how employers can be navigating when employees indicate that they, have an exemption.
So what's important to note is that employees don't have to walk in and hand you their medical note from the doctor. And also, given this day and age, that it's deadly, if not scary, to go into a doctor's office to try and get that note. Sometimes it can be really difficult. And so we highly encourage employers to work with employees in an interactive process, just like you would for any accommodation, any situation. If the employee says that they aren't able to wear a face mask, talk to them about what is the nature of their job. I believe Patrick and John were both talking about having separate work areas for their employees. So it all depends, again, on what type of business it is. Are there telework options available? Can you implement plexiglass barriers? Can you try different face coverings? Can you potentially use, they're not perfect, but they're better than nothing, face shields for customers? Is there, again, an office space that is away from everybody else? It really all kind of depends, again, upon the nature of the business and what is available. Obviously, forward facing, working at a grocery store, it doesn't make it really possible. Unless potentially, working the night shift, and it's a small store. But it really is up to the business. And I hate to throw that out there and not give specifics, but unless I actually am talking to a specific business, it's really difficult to actually give very specific answers.
Yeah. So, could you talk a little bit more about reasonable accommodations for customers? For example, maybe we look at a retail operation and an office environment, where somebody might be coming in to pick something up or ordering or something like that.
Sure. So reasonable accommodations are required by the ADA for any business, as long as it doesn't present an undue hardship or change the fundamental structure or nature of the business. And so what that means is, people understand that, staffing may be light at this point right now, so you might not have all the staff that's necessary or required to provide certain accommodations, but some suggestions are to try to set aside special shopping times for individuals who are not able to wear face coverings, to have, doctors have moved to it, so tele-appointments, if that's a possibility. Being able to have an order system online, and especially for this particular situation, I realize that sometimes that there are additional costs with ordering online and delivery or pickup, but potentially looking at waiving that or lowering those costs so it makes it economical for an individual to actually use those accommodations. So that way they don't have to try and come into the store. I've even had and heard of situations of, okay, I don't condone smoking, but somebody needing a pack of cigarettes and standing outside the business and calling the business and saying, hey, I'd like to get this. And they were able to just take the cash, walk inside it. And it all depends on how busy that business is at the time as well. I mean, if you've got, peak shopping hours, it's sometimes not going to be possible. But just as the governor suggested, that there should always be a point person with any business to identify and be like the COVID crew. I highly suggest during any shift, or if it's a smaller business, for just the business itself, to have one point person who can decide on what accommodations are available. And just remember that if you offer them one day, you have to offer them the next day. And if you also have a website, I highly recommend putting the special times or what accommodations or what are available on your website. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this. Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but I know that the public health actually just came out with a new poster, and I've sent the link to Lee to forward out to the members. There's a new poster that talks about how some people can't wear face coverings, and it serves two purposes. One is to educate people regarding the fact that there are people who will have exemptions, and so hopefully that can limit the negative interactions and confrontations that people with disabilities are having. But the other piece of it is I highly encourage businesses to actually post this in their window with a telephone number or even a website address to reach out to the business. So that way they don't even have to go in. They don't even have to try and have that conversation where it can be a difficult situation to even try and get into the business to talk to the business about what accommodations they can offer. When in doubt, always just ask the customer as well, because they might have a lot of suggestions that have worked easily for them in the past or with other retailers.
Yeah, that's great. I love posting it outside with, a number, so people can, be proactive and really kind of get a plan and figure out how that accommodation can work. So, we've talked about people that do have exemptions from, mask wearing, both employee and customer side. And then unfortunately we have a political issue that has now arisen apparently over mask use, and some people not believing in them or feeling very strongly against. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, Pat, from kind of putting your HR supervisory hat on, how would you respond to an office employee who is, a proclaimed against masks, doesn't believe in their effectiveness and refuses to wear one, and does not have a medical exemption? Walk us through kind of how you would navigate that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the hypothetical. We've in our
purely hypothetical.
Yeah, no, so far it has been anyway. So, I mean, I think whether it's in our offices, whether our corporate offices or our regional offices or in our retail locations, I think that conversation with employees, like we are perfectly fine saying, like, this is a condition of employment. And, the fact that we have our CEO, walking around both when he visits the retail locations and when he's walking around the offices, he's wearing his mask. And so if senior executives and, people in accounting and people in IT and people in buying are if everybody's doing this, then, we make this a condition of employment. And again, I don't want to suggest that we are, we have perfect execution or perfect enforcement here. It's a daily struggle to make sure that people are wearing their masks and wearing them, properly. But we have not seen pushback by employees. The political issue raises itself with members, honestly, and sometimes that gets some great publicity on social media. I think most listeners here probably have seen some examples of bad behavior, in Costco warehouses where members are expressing their political rights. And again, I mean, two things. One, I really do think that we benefit from having, this membership environment. And, most of our shoppers, they really do not they love Costco enough that don't want to risk losing their membership over an issue like this. And by the way, some of them, hundreds of members have canceled their membership as a result of specifically because of the mask policy. But we've also checked sort of on the back end of this in the early days where, they'll do that impulsively, and then, later on they'll sign up under a different, name or membership number. So we're not really losing these people. But I do feel like, there's the membership, environment, but there's also this ability to, we have a very mature, trained management staff, particularly senior management staff. They deal with so much, in terms of our, member demands, member issues. This is one thing that is, difficult, that it gets piled upon them. But they're used to diffusing situations. And so again, they're appealing to these members, even those that express are trying to express a political statement, to just have them understand, like, this is what we're doing. This is the rule of entry. And at least so far, again, I don't want to suggest that we're perfect at it, but at least so far we've got pretty decent compliance.
That's great. So let's shift gears a little bit to some more best practices around wearing masks indoors for employees. So John, I'd love your thoughts on, what is PSE doing, or what have you seen other companies do in terms of best practices? So, you have an office employee that is, 6 feet from another employee. Are employees required to wear masks all day while inside, or when they're at their desks, can they remove it? What are some of the things that you guys have put into place or have heard? And I'll probably ask the same question to both Patrick and Kimberly as well.
Yeah, we've tried to just simplify our requirement by saying if you're indoors, you wear the mask. And we also follow Labor and Industries guidance, and they make an exception for if you're alone in a room with 4 walls and a door, the door is closed, you can take off the mask. And so we also allow for that exception. There are also some cubicle height requirements that Labor Industries has come up with around the height of cubes being consistent with the breathability of someone walking by, and our facilities are all over the place, and some have very open floor plans, some have tall cubes, some have low cubes, and sometimes in the same space they have tall and low. So rather than trying to delineate out, parse up our buildings by where do you have to wear it and where do you not have to wear it, we're just saying you need to wear it even when you're at your desk.
Pat, what are your thoughts? What has Costco been doing?
Similar to John, in our offices, we've tried to keep it really simple, and there have been some appeals to our CEO for some exceptions and some complexity, but we're just keeping it very simple and saying, if you're at the offices, if you're on premises, wear your mask. And it's so much easier for us to deal with the black and the white of that. The exception is if you're eating, if you're in a deli, or if you're eating or drinking, obviously you can't wear your mask, but otherwise you're supposed to wear your mask. And again, it gets modeled by our CEO, and that really helps a lot.
Kimberly?
Frankly, I think John and Patrick have actually covered it. I mean, the requirement is it's a condition of employment. So if you don't wear it, you need to leave. And I had just thought about it that, okay, so you send them home for a day and let them think about it. And if they still refuse to comply, then you need to put them on leave. I mean, this is going to save our lives. And that's what people need to understand. Whether they believe it or not, it's still a law, and they need to do it. And so just know that, for businesses particularly, you guys have the law on your side. You have the employment law, that if it's a condition of employment and they refuse to comply, then you can put them on leave. You can do what you need to do with them as an employee. If they're a customer, you can actually up to and involving the police if necessary to remove them for trespassing. Even if they have an exemption and they cite an exemption, if that's not part of your reasonable accommodation policy to allow them to shop in the store where everybody else is, then you can still ask them to leave. It's kind of black and white in that case.
Yeah, we're just living in such a different time, right? You have business owners that are just now opening up, or businesses that are just opening up, have gone through an economic trial, and also wanting to be respectful of people. I'd really like to talk about the training aspect for employees, particularly with employees that are dealing with, frontline customers, like at a grocery store, for example. How, Pat, did you guys go about training your employees to have conversations? For example, if someone is, wearing their mask and then they take it off in the store, or, varying levels of non-compliance or just incorrect use of masks. What did Costco do to kind of equip employees?
Yeah, thanks. So there's both the I guess the enforcement that employees undertake. There's actually a lot of enforcement as it comes to masks that's like self-enforcement by members as well, because they're talking to each other. Honestly, I mean, this is such a certainly now it's such a societal thing that there's some positive encouragement that even members give to each other. But in terms of our employees specifically, we've made sure that those communications are positive. Those communications are encouragement. Those 90+% of those communications are truly are they're friendly, they're positive, they're in a vein of this community. And again, the ones that are obviously going to be hostile, obviously going to be adversarial, we've made sure that it's really the managers that in the retail stores that need to handle those. And again, it's been really important to make sure that this happens as best as, like any encounter like this has to happen as best as possible without an audience, because it just seems like the audience sometimes emboldens the bad behavior. And we do have that ultimate, I mean, we don't like to do it, of course, but we have that ultimate penalty of disinviting somebody to continue shopping at Costco. We can, we are certainly not above pulling somebody's membership if they refuse to obey the rules. And, we've done that. We've had to do that. I will say too, I mean, and it's worth noting that I think certainly the difficult thing is not the person who, is trying to make a political statement and, wants to stand on their rights. Those ones are actually fairly easy to deal with. You can either diffuse that or you can escort that person, out of the building. It's the people that, are saying, magic words about having a disability or, needing an exception or having a medical condition that is causing at least a little bit of consternation amongst our employees. There has been pushback by employees of, saying like, can we ask them to prove, can we ask them for medical documentation? And of course we tell them that they can't. And so that's—
Kimberly's shaking her head.
I know.
No,
yeah,
in agreement. Cannot ask.
Kimberly, don't worry. We're not doing that. But, you can see that that's a natural, inclination, for employees. So there's been some training there for sure, just to let people know, let our employees know that that's not a path that you want to go down. And again, it's been very much, the exception. Most people honestly can wear a mask or some sort of a face covering, for the period of time that they're in a Costco location.
Mm-hmm. Although my shopping trips to Costco, I'm there quite a while. So I can never get out without multiple cartloads, it seems. So all of the great things at Costco. So we have a question about what accommodations and safety measures can be put in for staff eating in break rooms, because it's difficult to wear a mask at that point. John, what are you guys doing at PSE in kind of those common spaces for, a break room type area?
Well, we're trying to discourage the use of common spaces, and especially to congregate indoors to eat lunch together, those kind of things. We really would prefer if people are in the office that they eat at their desks.
They could have a Zoom lunch.
Or, do something like that. Yeah. Obviously you can't wear a face covering when you're eating your lunch, but certainly enforcing social distance there. And then again, trying to avoid those shared spaces as much as possible.
Yeah, Pat, what are you guys doing at Costco and for break rooms for lunch? You have warehouse employees that can't eat at their cash register, for example.
Right. So I think in the offices and in our break rooms in our retail locations, and also in our food courts, where you get the pizza and hot dog and things like that, we, like John says, we tried to discourage the gathering, the congregating of people in common spaces. It's hard to do, but sometimes what we've done, as much as possible, create the distance, remove seating, move seating apart, and then sometimes construct some physical barriers in terms of like plexiglass and things like that. That seems to be a pretty effective way of doing it. In the offices in particular, we've had the benefit of not having everybody back in the offices, so our density is reduced. Our seating is much more spaced out, and we've been able to put up the plexiglass barriers for those people that when more people start to come back, they're able to create that, not just the space but the barrier as well. So it sort of depends on the space, but yeah, we're very much trying to encourage the distancing and the barriers where we can't distance.
Great. So Kimberly, we've talked about people with exemptions for face coverings and mask wearing. There is, other disabilities as well, such as hard of hearing, deaf, that are also affected by face coverings and mask wearing. I'd love for you to talk to us about the things that we should keep in mind for those folks.
So it's actually really confusing on how the exemption is written, because it actually is written to say that people who are deaf or hard of hearing are exempt from wearing a face covering, which there are actually a lot of people who are deaf and hard of hearing who actually do wear face coverings. The exemption is for people who are interacting with them to actually lower or remove their face covering just briefly enough to have a conversation, because sometimes lip reading can be accomplished. Other times there are people who are deaf or hard of hearing who don't do lip reading. But still it can help facilitate conversations. So please let your employees know that it is allowed to lower your face covering. You're still attempting to maintain that 6-foot distance so you're not right up in somebody's face when you're doing it, but that it is allowed to lower your face covering in order to be able to speak to a person who's deaf and hard of hearing. Frankly, you can't tell that sometimes. And so, if a person doesn't hear you, potentially step back a second, or if they don't respond, step back a little bit and lower your face covering just to see if that helps. The other option is to supply your employees with face shields as well, because it's not a perfect barrier, but if they're wearing the face covering and they have a face shield on, they're a little more protected if they still feel uncomfortable about doing that. But it is okay to lower your face covering in order to communicate.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult, obviously, for deaf and hard of hearing people to have them face coverings on. One of my closest friends is deaf, and every time I go into a store, I always think of her, and because I know she relies a lot on lip reading as well for her communication and understanding folks. So one last question. For you, Kimberly, do these hard and fast rules regarding mask wearing by customers and patron also apply to indoor public spaces? There are discussions in the library regarding denying access, etc.
Sorry, I had to unmute. So again, it all depends on what accommodations the business is willing to offer. If there is a space, separate room that you can allow patrons to go into who are not wearing a face covering, that can be an accommodation. I understand that you don't want to deny services to an individual. However, you still need to protect your employees as well as the other customers who are wearing face coverings. And so, again, it comes down to, especially like particularly a library, is there a separate reading room that you can allow that individual to go into in order to be able to still use the library? But you might need to consider potentially rearranging, if they're there for computer access, you might need to put some computers in that area, because this is not going to go away anytime quick, and it's something we're going to need to consider for a long period of time. So again, some reorganization might need to be considered. I also saw another question in the question and answer. How do you deal with a customer who comes in to keep your employees safe, like a hostess at a restaurant? That's where I highly suggest putting the poster up. The poster example that I believe Lee had put in the chat box, put it up on your door. It's not going to prevent everybody, but a lot of times what I see, especially in some of the confrontations for people who have exemptions, is that they don't know when those special times are. They don't know what those accommodations are. So if you put that poster up and you list the accommodation, or you list a telephone number or a contact method for the business, that's what I highly suggest. So that way you can help to potentially limit that. The other thing that you can do, and I've seen it with a lot of businesses, is that they will put a plexiglass barrier up in front of, they'll have especially at a restaurant, they'll have the dais or the podium for check-in, but they'll have that plexiglass barrier in front. And then of course your lobbies are just going to have to be areas that you have high sanitation rates, every 30 minutes, every 20 minutes, where you're constantly wiping everything down.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering that question that came in as well. So as we wrap up here, I would like for just each of you to kind of give us some parting words of wisdom for our business owners and operators who are navigating requiring face masks for employees and customers, or lessons learned, or something last that you think that we should hear. So we'll start with you, Patrick.
Okay, sure. I think I would just, I'm going to echo what our CEO said about this when we first instituted our rule, and we posted it on our Costco.com website, and we continue to have it up there today. It was just a simple acknowledgement of understanding that this was an inconvenience, understanding that, you know, it created some discomfort. But again, just sort of trying to inspire people to just like, this is one thing that we can do. And this is one, you know, there's not, you know, that many, like, we can't invent a vaccine, we can't develop a cure, but we can do this. And again, it's kind of this like appealing to this community sense for people to do this one thing that we can all do together. So that's what I would say.
Great. John?
I would say just try to keep it as simple as you can. When you dig into the rules, you'll find all kinds of nuances and ambiguity, and as much as you can just keep it black and white so that your employees can understand it, that's probably you know, will lead to more people doing it. And then the second thing is just communicate often and in different ways with your employee base about the need to wear the face covering.
Great. And Kimberly?
Just remember, you can prohibit a person without a face covering from entering your business, but refusal of entry is not a refusal of service. Figure out what your accommodation plan is prior to having to deal with it. And a note, exemption cards are fake. There's nothing real about them. Don't be fooled. They are fake. There is no exemption cards.
I have not seen an exemption card, but they are fake. That's helpful to know.
They are. They're all over Facebook.
Huh.
Go on Facebook and look them up. There's exemption cards. Yeah, they are fake. Do not be intimidated by them. Don't
That's
even look
helpful.
at them.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. I know I got some really good practical tips. I think, you know, my last parting comments to those watching today are, you know, we're talking about this as business owners, operators, managers, employees, but we also all have a social responsibility in this too, to be gracious in our conversations with people who are not wearing masks. And it doesn't just have to be up to, you know, that store owner to, you know, say, why aren't you wearing a mask? There's really great ways that we as community members can help educate people and help people. Maybe people don't have a mask. Maybe they are needing to get connected to a resource, or maybe you can help be part of that accommodation for someone in a public space that's not even a restaurant, right? Or a grocery store, to be able to help people as we're all navigating this and as it's uncomfortable and not perfect for all of us. So those would be my parting words, is to, you know, also just a challenge to everyone to look at this conversation and think, okay, what is my part in this? Both within my business, but within kind of the world that I operate in. Well, just another reminder that this webinar will be available on the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce event page later today. And you will also be getting a post-event recap email that will have links to some of these great resources as well. Thank you, John, Pat, and Kimberly, so much for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful, very, very sunny Tuesday. I hope everyone can get outside for just a few minutes today and enjoy the sun. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.